Hey guys, welcome to week 23, the final week of our Ezra Nehemiah devotional series. This week we find ourselves in Nehemiah chapter 13. And again, the chapter that closes out everything that we have gone through in Ezra Nehemiah and looking at the story in the scriptures. We've seen the Israelites returning back to the promised land, back from exile. We saw the rebuilding of the temple, and now we see in Nehemiah the rebuilding of the wall around the temple to secure the temple. And everything has gone in the last couple chapters seems pretty smooth. I mean, there was a covenant renewal ceremony, the people of God worshiping God at the temple, at the place that they once were able to worship him before the exile. And it seemed like chapter 12 was probably an appropriate ending, right? That there was kind of like a happily ever after, that everything was secure, that everything that they had sought out to accomplish with Nehemiah as their leader, they accomplished. It seemed like that was the appropriate and best place to end, but it does not end there. We actually continue on to another chapter here in chapter 13. And as we'll see, it is not a happily ever after type of ending. We see in this chapter, in chapter 13, we see Nehemiah go to the temple and realize and recognize and see that the very sin that the Israelites had committed to turn from, that they actually were falling right back into it. That there was a lot of chaos, that there was sin, that there was marriages with people and intermingling, so to speak, with people outside of the Israelite community, outside of God's covenantal people. And it was a mess, that they immediately fell right back into the sin that they were once guilty of, that they repented of, but now they had fallen directly back into it. And Nehemiah, in response to this, gets really mad. So mad that it says in verse 25, it says, "And I confronted them and cursed them and beat some of them and pulled out their hair. And I made them take oath in the name of God, saying, you shall not give your daughters to their sons, or take their daughters for your sons, or for yourselves." So we had those themes of intermarriage, of the Israelites marrying people outside of God's covenantal community. And now we see them entering right back into that and falling right back into that. And Nehemiah's response is to curse them, to beat them, to pull out their hair. I mean, it is chaos. It's chaotic. And so as we reflect on this, it just seems like such a really odd way to end this story, to end the book of Ezra Nehemiah. It says in the end, the last two verses, "Thus I cleansed them from everything foreign, and I established the duties of the priests and Levites, each in his work, and I provided for the wood offering at appointed times and for the first fruits. Remember me, oh my God, for good." And even if we rewind back, Nehemiah says something similar. "Remember me, oh my God," this is verse 14, "concerning this, and do not wipe out my good deeds that I have done for the house of my God and for his servants." So we end with Nehemiah freaking out and punishing the people for their sin, and him crying out to God, saying, "God, remember me. I've tried my best. I've done my best. Please remember me in doing that." So what in the world are we to take away from a passage such as this? What in the world are we to pull from something like this as 21st century readers on the other side of the world? What are we to do with this? This incredibly odd, strange thing that was chosen to end and wrap up the story of Ezra Nehemiah. What the heck are we to do with it? Well, if you remember at the beginning, there was this expectancy that certain prophecies were being fulfilled, that they were going back to the land, which was happening, that they were rebuilding the temple, which was happening. But then there were these prophecies about the world coming to the temple and encountering God and approaching him, that the Israelites, the nation of Israel, the people of God, were to declare the glory of God, reveal and show the glory of God to the world around them. And it was through them that God was going to show himself to the world. So there was an expectancy that was going to happen. And yet time and time again, throughout Ezra Nehemiah, we've been disappointed. We have seemingly gotten close to those things happening, but it has not happened. And see, In this chapter, as we reflect on this, as we reflect on the Israelites and things finally improving after decades of them being away from their homeland, being in exile, things finally improving, them getting back to where they wanted to go, that they are shocked with a profound amount of disappointment. And in this, I think it's remarkably timely for you and I as we get back into what is somewhat of a normal world coming out of a pandemic, that we now are getting back to this place of where we don't have to do the same things we did. We don't have to wear masks like we did before, that we don't have to worry about a virus spreading and hurting those as much as we did before. Again, we're not clearly out of the woods all the way, but we're heading in that direction. And I think that reading this chapter and reading Ezra Nehemiah as a whole helps give us a picture of the fact that even though things in our lives may be going back to the way that we want them to go, that those things still, even though we have those things, we are not going to be satisfied often in the ways that we think that we will. See, I think in this last year, we've gotten in this mindset and this thought process that if only things were this way, looked better, or looked back like the way they did before COVID, then I would be happier, then my friends would be happier, or then my family would be happier. But if that's our mindset, we are going to be greatly disappointed. See, the whole purpose of Ezra Nehemiah was God, in the storyline with God and his people and the Israelites, was for God to show his people that it is all about him. It is all about reliance upon him, dependence upon him. And that here, as we see with the Israelites, it's not just about going to the temple and having the temple itself, but it's about having God himself. It's not just about this building, but it is about who would dwell in that building, and about encountering and approaching and being with and having fellowship with God himself. That's what it's all about. And the same applies to us as we emerge from COVID, so to speak, that it is not about this world that is not in a pandemic state, and it's not about us getting to do the things that we want to do, but it is all about the trajectory of our lives, all about God himself and being with him. Now, we could have a lot of money. We could be really successful. We could go to the schools that we want to go to, that we would have the friends or the boyfriend or the girlfriend that we really want to have. But ultimately, we are left unsatisfied and longing apart from God himself, that the thing that we need most is a person, and that is Jesus Christ. See, the Israelites needed a new heart. That's why they fell right back into their sin. That's why we fall right back into our sin, because we need to be renewed in our hearts by the gospel, by the grace of Christ. And that is what truly changes us. That's what we need. That's what this whole book was pointing to, and that's what it's pointing you and I as members of the church today to. The fact that we need God himself, that we are after God himself, and that this whole story is to point us to God himself, and that the truth that we are united to God himself through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. That his perfect life, that his death, that his resurrecting in our behalf and his ascending into heaven and ruling over all things is exactly what you and I need, and is exactly what we as human beings long for, even if we don't really know that. We long for that. We long to be united with our King and with our God. And that's what this whole book is pointing us to, has been pointing us to, and continues to point us to today. If we look to the things of this world, to the circumstances of our lives to shape and shift in the way that we want them to go the way that we want them to go, that even when those things go the way that we want them to go, we find ourselves remarkably disappointed. The reason we find ourselves disappointed in those things, because the only thing that can satisfy that is Jesus Christ himself. So finish this book, finish this chapter, sit in the weirdness of it, and allow that weirdness to drive you to Jesus Christ himself. Thanks, guys.